Right, this is Julie Pearson Little Thunder with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. It's January 24th, 2020, and I'm interviewing potter and ceramic artist Donna Prigmore for the Oklahoma Women's Artist Interview Series. Donna, you joined the Brady Artist Studio many years ago, and you're also a founding member of the group Creative Cabal. Your work is sometimes utilitarian, actually mostly utilitarian. And besides producing and showing your own pottery, you teach pottery classes and make jewelry. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your life and work. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born right here in Tulsa, St. John's Hospital. I have lived in Tulsa almost all my life with a few exceptions. Went to elementary school, junior high, high school, Central High School. I'm so much a Tulsa girl, I even went to the University of Tulsa. Been right here all my life.
Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have one sister, Teresa, and Teresa lives in California, Southern California, in the southern wine country around Temecula, Murrieta Hot Springs. She's an educator. She's a retired middle school principal. And although we call each other our baby sister, she is 10 and a half years older than I am. But I call her my baby sister, and she does the same for me. So no one ever knows.
What did your folks do for a living?
Well, they have both passed away. My mother, her employment background was in the restaurant business. She was a hostess at the Tulsa Hotel here years and years ago in the 40s. And my father was a chef. So they had the restaurant business in common. My dad was chef at Southern Hills Country Club when I was born in the 40s. And he then went to the Tulsa Club and then across the alley to the Phil Tower building was chef and manager of the Phil Tower Grill for 25 or 30 years.
So my next question is about the creative environment in your home, which I assume includes cooking.
Well, I may be the chef's daughter who doesn't cook, but yes, you're right. It was, I was lucky enough to have my mother's sister, my aunt, and her husband living next door. And my aunt, my uncle was involved in television. He was one of the first newscasters for Channel 6. He joined Channel 6 in 1950, I think. And my aunt was always very involved in theater. So she included me in some of those theatrical performances from a very early age.
So what is your first memory of seeing art, however you would define it?
Well, I think my first memory of art has to be tied to color. And my aunt, who was very theatrical, was surrounded by color. She had cataracts and didn't see well unless it was very bright and bold colors. And her whole house was just a myriad of wonderfully bright and exciting color. And I think that's my first introduction to something I saw as art was her house.
I see. And lots of texture and three-dimensional things too?
Well, yes. A lot of collections of different things, and again, everything she had in her house had texture and color, and it was even things that would normally hang on your wall to be two-dimensional were three-dimensional. She had some wonderful life and color in her house.
What is your first memory of making art?
Well, I have to say I've never had as far as an art class in school, never actually had an art class except in elementary school. And I don't remember a lot about that. I do remember drawing on my own, loving to do portraits from photographs. Not that they were very good, but I enjoyed doing them. I didn't get into ceramics or pottery until probably I was around 40, and it was quite by accident.
So, how about junior high? Same thing, not really in the art classes?
Never had, just no.
High school?
I was on an academic track for college. Central High School had an art program, but it was drawing. And it was an elective, and my electives were journalism.
I see. And you went to University of Tulsa for college. What did you major in there?
Language arts education. I wanted to teach Spanish. I wanted to teach English in a Spanish-speaking country. And here I am.
Did you have the chance to go abroad?
Yeah, not to a Spanish-speaking. Well, yes, I did go, but as an adult to a Spanish-speaking country. But no, never to teach English.
So what happened after college?
Well, I married and went to work, and wasn't really involved in the arts as such for a long time, until probably the 80s, the middle 80s. I took employment with a paper distributor, a printing paper distributor, and my position there was as a paper consultant. And I had several jobs in that with that company, learning about paper. But then I became a paper consultant, calling on ad agencies and graphic designers and helping them choose the proper paper for their projects, making what we call dummies, mock-ups of their printed piece out of different papers. And I've said that I never had an art class, but in reality I had probably 25 or 30 years of an art class dealing with graphic designers and learning from them, because they taught me color and texture and proportion and shape and negative space, and all of the things that they did I had to be aware of in order to help them with their projects. And my territory was Oklahoma, Southeast Kansas, Southwest Missouri, Northwest Arkansas. I had quite a territory and a lot of graphic designers to learn from.
It's huge. So you were really traveling on your own quite a bit.
Yes, yeah. But that was what I call a 30-year art class.
Exactly. I can understand that. So you take this, tell me the story about taking your first pottery class, which I think would have been around 1989.
Well, two of my clients, friends, had said they wanted to take a pottery class, and I was happy for them and said, you have a good time, and they said, you're coming too, and I said, no, I'm not. And that went back and forth. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. For almost a month. So in order to get them to just drop it, I paid my money. I showed up for class, and they didn't. So
This is the first class.
Here I am. Yes. So immediately I was drawn to pottery, to clay, and a lot of people have asked me, what is it about clay that really drew you in? I don't know. I can't put I can't define it. It just seemed right, and I loved it. It was fun, and I could do it. And I'd always said I wasn't creative. I was appreciative. I could appreciate art, but couldn't create it. And I found something that I thought, this is for me. This is what I want to do.
Were you hand building?
Yes, I started out hand building, and I moved to the wheel after probably 3 or 4 years. I moved to the wheel.
Again, through a class?
Yes. Yes. And I was fortunate enough in those early years to work with some very, very fine potters. And my instructor, I had John Wissinger was my instructor on the wheel, the first instructor. Jim Tabor was another, but John and his wife Lisa, after I'd been taking lessons from him for, I don't know, a couple of years, said, we want to buy a pottery studio. Do you want to come in with us and start a pottery studio? Yeah, hey, I'm game. What do we do? And Tulsa had lost a very fine potter at the time, and his entire studio was for sale. So we negotiated with his parents and bought his equipment and moved all of his equipment into this location 25 years ago, right here. And we had a gallery, and we had an overabundance of equipment stuffed in here. And we had a monthly art show in the gallery, an opening every month, and it was exciting during that time. But we started it 25 years ago. And my present partner, Mel Cornshucker, also potter, we invited him to a show that was in conjunction with a Adel conference. It was a Native American conference. It was Gilcrease, the Hogue Gallery at the University of Tulsa, Philbrook, and our gallery here. Since we were a pottery studio, three-dimensional, we were the three-dimensional gallery for that conference. And we invited Mel to be one of the artists, and he came. Shortly after that, he joined us working in the studio, and my original partners then left Tulsa, and Mel became my partner in the studio. So he's been here probably 23, 24 years with me.
So I want to backtrack just a moment. When you joined the studio, you're already divorced.
Yes.
You're divorced.
Right.
And had you shown at smaller shows? Had you shown your pottery or sold your pottery before that point?
Never.
So this is your first opportunity.
Yes, having the storefront here was the first time I had, and it was interesting doing that because I'd never even thought about it. And when my pieces started selling, I felt like Sally Fields when she made that acceptance speech and she said, they like me, they really like me. Well, that's kind of the way I felt. They like my pottery, they like it. And I just started making things for people to use and enjoy, and that's how I fell into functional pottery, because I want people to use them and enjoy them and share that with people.
What were some of the first things that you made?
Well, the first things that I made were decorative. They weren't functional, and they were boxes, or I guess you could say the vases were functional, but they were more decorative than actually functional pieces. And you can only make so many of those. But then I started making more functional pieces, and that's what I enjoy doing.
Did you, after you got to the studio here, did you continue to show in other places those first few years?
The first few years, no. I didn't. This was the major source of sales for me, and they were few and far between, but it was selling. I think the addition of Mel Cornshucker, who does is involved with other art shows and galleries and selling his work all across the country. It's inspired me to try that. And I think the first time I tried it, it was with my jewelry, not my pottery, because I had been making jewelry, assemblage jewelry, for a long time, even before I started with pottery.
Okay, and so you were showing those also at the shop.
Right.
So with John and Lisa, before Mel comes on, you've kind of got some guides through the business aspect of it.
Yes. Lisa at the time was Lisa Kahn. Dr. Kahn was a professor at TU, ancient history, and she then became a registrar at Gilcrease. And so we did have some contacts in other areas that helped us with the business and getting started. So, but yes, that was my first foray into an art gallery and studio.
Any other valuable things you might have learned from them?
I think being an artist, John and I had an left-right brain kind of thing, but since I had been in sales and had always done office work, I had this conflict of left-right. It one would take over and then the other one would take over, where Lisa was no nonsense. It was this way. This is exactly what and she was right. She was always right. And I had this back and forth, and John was always the artist. So I was sort of in between the two of them. So my lesson, I think I learned, was to think from both sides, which sometimes doesn't happen for an artist.
Right.
And sometimes I lose sight of the business side and start doing this other.
So you've explained that when Mel came on board, one of the things he brought was this, business of he was going to national shows, and he introduced you kind of to that idea. What other things did he bring?
Oh my goodness! Well, his talent, for one, which is phenomenal. Watching him work for the last 23, 24 years has been, again, another 24-year art class. His knowledge and his questions and the experimentation that we've started doing with glazes and clay and the reaction of the two. I wish I'd paid a lot more attention to chemistry when I was in school. I didn't, and I wish I had. But together, I think we've, if Mel doesn't have an answer right away, we research. If I don't have an answer right away, we research. We work together on finding things. But he brought his talent and his knowledge of ceramics that is vast and has been so valuable for me.
Now, are you doing mostly wheel, or are you doing
No,
hand building?
I'm doing hand building
Almost
exclusively. Yeah.
Exclusively.
I had surgery on both thumbs, tendonitis, not caused by pottery.
How long ago was it?
It's a long time, and I can't wedge. My wrists are not as strong as they used to be, and I can't wedge the clay and work the clay the way you have to for the wheel. And I can throw maybe 3 or 4 small bowls, and then my hands give out. And I can't convince Mel that he should wedge all my clay for me, so I have to do it myself. And hand building, I prefer hand building. I always have preferred hand building. It just, to me, the possibilities are endless.
So, making pottery and operating a storefront at the same time, how do you navigate that?
Well, we have a small storefront, so it's not, and this is a studio, so it's not as if we have set hours of retail, because we really don't. We're open on the first Friday art walk here, and if we're in the studio, we're open, or you can knock on the door and we'll unlock it. But it's not so much a storefront 5-6 days a week, so it's not that difficult. In the past, we have had a separate storefront, and that got a little too much. Mel would run the gallery or the studio, then I would run the gallery, and we had a bead store, and we had so many things going for us, and I would have to do it and then find time to do the pottery also. So we discussed it and decided that the studio would continue, and we would make a small storefront in the studio.
Sounds like some nice flexibility. How much of your time is spent creating, and how much on teaching?
We only teach. We only have 2 classes. I teach 1 to 4 on Tuesdays, a hand building class, and then Thursdays 6 to 9, another 3-hour. We teach, and that is both wheel and hand building. So those two classes take up, of course, those 6 hours, but then there's always handling, moving their creations and firing their creations and trying to figure out where to put them in our limited space here in the studio is something. But I would say the teaching has maybe a third of the time that we spend in the gallery is dealing with students and with their work.
What kinds of discoveries have you made working with students?
Patience. That was a discovery for me. But the other thing is, I think I've always had latent school teacher tendencies, and it really has been something that I have enjoyed. Again, I enjoy teaching, which is what I wanted to do originally in college, was to teach English. I come from a family of educators. I have my sister, several in my family have been, my grandfather was a teacher. But I think that working with students has honed my skills and my communication skills because if I don't exactly get my point across, they students follow exactly what you say, and if you don't tell them the whole story, they don't get the whole piece done. So it has patience, I think, and communication skills, and my creativity as well, and from the technical aspect, trying to we have some students who've been with us for 6-7 years. Well, trying to lead them in certain directions as to what projects to do and then letting them go and not wanting to do it for them has been something that has, because I want to get right in there and do it. But those are maybe the three things I've learned, and mainly about myself.
So talk a bit, if you would, about the beginnings of Creative Cabal. I understand it was kind of you and Robin Tilley and Penny Gage.
Well, actually, the original Cabal, probably 15, 16 years ago, Jim Watts, Claudia Doyle, who is not a member anymore, but David Halpern, Betsy Perry, photographer, Bob Hawks, photographer, and Jan, his wife, who's a fiber artist, and that's a long time to think back. Who was Linda Stilley? It was a small group. There were only about 8 of us, and through the years, we met once a month in someone's home. We still do, in someone's home. And Ron Fleming was one of the original members. And we would discuss what we were doing. Some of us, if we were working on something and were stumped, we'd bring it, and there would be suggestions. There would be back and forth input. And of course, we would have, food and drink and enjoy each other's company. But we had that friendship and that back and forth of the creative spark going. And through the years, slowly, there have been additions. We would invite people to meetings and bring in. We've had speakers, and we've had demonstrations, and they later became members. It was now we number probably close to 30, but not everyone comes every time. 25 to 30, but not everyone comes to every meeting every time. And we still meet in someone's home, and it's an enjoyable thing to get together and talk about what we're doing. And you learn so much about the art community in Tulsa by what each individual artist in their own medium, what they're doing.
And I think when you started, there weren't a lot of support groups for artists. There were lots of artists working, but in all
individual. And every now and then you need to bounce ideas off of people. You can't work in a vacuum. And we have writers in the Cabal. We have writers. We have painters and photographers and people working in clay and glass artists. And it's we have artists who work. Well, Kim Donor. Kim was one of the original members, and Kim works in glass, and she's a writer, and she's done pottery, and we're an eclectic group of people. And then as artists also, we have so many pursuits, and there's only so much time to do what everybody wants to do, but it's fun to to watch that progress as well.
Sure. So it sounds like maybe half of you were women, sort of, in the original group, about half men, half women.
Yes, and now it seems that it's more women.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Watts, Phil Cooper, and then David Halpern and Bob Hawkes, Joel Kelly. We have, and Ron Fleming. We have a lot of men in the group, but it does seem that it's more and more women have joined. Yeah.
Well, I was wondering what your impressions were in terms of the space that was out there for women artists at that time when you started making pottery.
Well, a lot of us had to make our own space. I think we had the Color Connection Gallery in Utica Square, Diane Solomon, who's now a Cabal member, and we had Living Arts. Steve Liggett gave women artists a great. We had Tulsa. And still have Living Arts. We now have Liggett Studio, and Steve has recently had his own studio and gallery. But back then, I think it was Tulsa Artists Coalition, Living Arts, and then the women who the Doran, Marianne Doran gallery. But women made their own space. I think it wasn't there wasn't a lot, but now that I've vocalized it, it seems like there were quite a few spaces.
That made me kind of think also about the fact that we did have these several women gallery owners who were really important to the whole art scene.
Yeah, Linda Pearson. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot.
So your Creative Cabal is currently having a show at the Hardesty, and it's wonderful. I went and looked at it the other day. How did that show come about?
Well, honestly, we were at a meeting several years ago. It's probably been 4 years ago. The AHA Center, the Hardesty Art Center, was brand new, had just been completed, and we could see a beautiful space. And we started looking at ourselves and thinking how much talent we had. Mel and I had a gallery, not in this location with the studio, but at 7 East, at that time Brady, now Reconciliation Way, almost to Main Street here down to the west. And we had a gallery. We had a Cabal show. It was a small space, but at that time it was a small group of artists. And it was fun. It was wonderful to see all of the art in one spot. So since we were a much larger group, needed a much larger space for a show, the conversation just turned to, why don't we try for a show at the Hardesty since it's brand new? We did, and there were some complications and back and forth, and we would have to wait for 2 years because there was a waiting list of artists. So it was still there. We still had our application in with them, and suddenly we were contacted a year, maybe a little over a year ago. Are you still interested in having a show? Yes, we are. So it's been a long time in coming, and a long time in the process.
I think there's sort of an interesting dynamic also in Tulsa that, probably plays out all over the country, but this notion that the artists who are working and living here, that their work somehow isn't quite as interesting as people that you bring in from other platforms, or other parts of the country. I mean, I'm just curious what you think about that.
I think some of that is true. I think I don't know why, but I think it's true. I can take my pottery to other cities. I don't travel far. But I can go to another state and do really well. I think there's maybe it's a freshness, being seen somewhere else for the first time. I don't know, but yes, I've experienced. I can do a lot other places. Mel, it's the same way. Well, no, Mel, it sells no matter where he is, so he has a following after as many years as he's been a potter.
Well, one of your pieces that I saw at Hardesty was covered with these little tiny skulls, and I'm wondering what gave you that idea.
Well, Living Arts
Yes.
has their own celebration of Day of the Dead. And I've supported myself, but I've helped to support and follow Living Arts from the very beginning here to do have my pottery at Day of the Dead festival at Living Arts. And one of the questions they always ask you when you make an application is, how does your work relate to the Day of the Dead? Well, my work was bowls and wonderful things, so I would have to sort of, in my application, move it through and around spirit bowls and things that and I would make skull jewelry to earrings and necklaces to sell as well. And I thought, I've got to get something with pottery with skulls. So I started making little things with skulls on them. And after that first time, 2 or 3 festivals after that, people would say, well, where are your skulls? So I thought, well, there's an idea, year-round skulls. So I started doing that, started making things with skulls on them, and it's just sort of evolved. I have skulls on all kinds of things. My coffee cups have skulls. They show up in some unexpected places now.
Well, and the pieces that you have at Hardesty, of course, they're completely covered. So I would think those would be really time-consuming, kind of labor-intensive pieces.
Well, the thing and yes, the construction of it was the time-consuming. The technical part of it was the time-consuming part. The interesting thing about those pieces is they were inspired by other pieces, and I honestly can't tell you why I wanted to put skulls on those pieces that I was putting in that show, but they just pop up. There they are, and that's what you see. That's what you get.
And beyond the boat motif and people who appreciate that motif, there's just something neat about the texturing and the color.
Yes.
The very dramatic color, and then just the dimensionality, the relief surfaces, and then that.
I think it's very interesting to watch people who see the pieces for the first time, and they see them from a distance and are drawn for whatever reason. Maybe it's the shape, maybe it's the color. But when they approach it and they look at them, they see texture, but they don't, until they get very close, see that well, those are skulls. And my my favorite thing is to watch people pick up a piece of mine with skulls and look at it, and then look up at me, and then look down at the skulls and look back like, you made this? And that to me is always the joy to see. They either love them or they put them down very quickly.
Well, what is one of the best compliments you've gotten on your work? And it might not be those pieces, it might be something else.
I think when someone says, I have coffee every morning in your cup, and I have coffee with you every day. I make a pie in your pie plate, and it's the best pie I've ever made. Or I see this every day. So that I think is the best compliment for me, is that people who buy my pieces, who receive them as gifts, or who buy them, use them and enjoy them, and the fact that they might at some point think of me when they are drinking their coffee is always a big compliment for me.
And you do more unusual. You have a purse out front in the window. A purse, so it's utilitarian, but it may not be used as a purse. It might be used in a different way, as a food container, but they're all, you can actually.
I make dresses, and they always have a neck opening where you could put flowers in them. My boat shape is something that could be used as a plant. Well, I keep my mail in mine at home, but there's always a functionality to even the decorative pieces that I make.
And you do a number of series, I noticed. What are some series you've especially enjoyed, and how do you know when the series has run its course, or do you? Maybe they don't.
I did a series, and even as recently added to it, of my dresses, and I think I've done probably 6 in that series. The lidded vessels, I've done a series. There've been 4 of them. I've done a series of boats, the boat shape, but I think I know when they've run their course, when I don't look forward to making another one, and that's if I don't really enjoy it or look forward to it. Well, that's done.
You mentioned that you had a commission for an urn, for a funeral urn.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that. I don't know if that was the first funeral urn that you've been commissioned to do.
Yes, it was. It is for someone who was very, very dear and very close. And it was an honor to be asked to do that. And it was an easy piece for me to do, oddly enough. It went together well. It went together with no problems. And I think it was maybe because of an emotional attachment to the person as well. It was my final gift, and it went together very, very well. And I was very pleased. I didn't want it to look like an urn. I wanted it to look, for someone who was a collector of my pottery, I wanted it to look like my pottery. And when I was asked to do it, the person who asked me said, um, I want her surrounded by your pottery, because she was in life. So that made me, I think, put a little more emotion into the piece, and I was very pleased with it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. It also has a couple of dragonflies on it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, Mel added a little touch because Mel knew the person as well, and added just his own little touch too. So it was a collaborative piece.
You and Mel often help each other at shows. I mean, you have for years. I'll sometimes see you, and especially when his wife was teaching. And
Yes.
you know, I would see you helping out at the booth at Santa Fe or Red Earth or Haskell, I think, a couple of times, and then vice versa. I'll see him at the garden show sometimes with you.
Yes.
And he may have some pieces in there, but often it's also to help you. And what are the benefits of that?
Oh, well, they're endless. I think for Mel, I would help him with shows when Michelle, his wife, was teaching. So through the school year, I helped him, and in the summer that she had off was her turn. And it's difficult to do a festival by yourself. An outdoor festival, you're putting up the tent, you're putting the weights on the tent, you're getting the tables set up, you're getting the tablecloths on, you're hauling the pottery, you're bringing that out, you're doing all of the things, you're setting up your displays, you're getting your sacks and your ability to take cash or charges or checks, you're getting all of your business things set up, and that you have to be there 2 hours in advance to do all that, and you're still setting up when the show opens and people are, how much is this? Can I buy that? What's this? And by yourself, it's very difficult. It isn't impossible, certainly, because I've done it and Mel's done it. Mel did it for years by himself, and the advantages a lot of times are just you standing up all day, you just want to take a break. But if you're by yourself, you really can't. But if there are two of you, one can take the customer and explain pieces, another can be selling, the other one can be wrapping pottery, taking a charge card, doing the business part of the day. Where if you're by yourself, you're changing hats all day long, and it gets to be so exhausting. And two people, it's a lot easier to do a show. Yes. So it can be then fun. Yes. To do a show, where by yourself it's just all work and no fun.
And then I think, it's inevitable, you working side by side, that there's some artistic cross-pollination, and I wonder what are the things that you've maybe enjoyed the most, or
well, I think the most flattering thing and the most enjoyment I get is if Mel asks my opinion on something. It's like, whoa, okay. And that to me is as enjoyable as anything else. But what do you think about this? Does this work, or do you think that works? What do you see that I'm not seeing? And it's that kind of thing. And again, I think it's the ability to work for 24 years side by side, 7 days a week in a studio with someone, and you can't spend that much time with someone without some cross-pollination of whatever, whether it's now I put some dragonflies on my pieces, but they're certainly not at all like Mel's. We use exactly the same glazes, and our pieces are totally different. They have they don't even begin to look like they came out of the same studio, although the glazes are exactly the same. It's an individual thing, but I think it's the back and forth of critiques, of bouncing ideas, the same as it's the cabal on steroids. I think it's that same
Right.
camarada of artists.
Neat. Now, have you ever incorporated, you talk about your assemblage necklaces and the jewelry that you still sell. Have you ever incorporated any three-dimensional objects in your pottery? Or any
In the
jewelry?
beginning, I did, yes. In the beginning, I did. But it just didn't work for me. It just, I couldn't get it to make sense to me. My jewelry always has a very ethnic feel. It's either, I love archaeology, I love anthropology, I love history. The beads, to me, the history of each piece, I wanted to know about the people who made the pieces I used. I wanted to understand where the pieces came from and what they originally might have been used for, and I wanted to know about the people who might have touched them. And I always loved doing unexpected things with my jewelry, putting pearls with lava rock or something that was totally unexpected. And again, it was always an Asian or a Middle Eastern or a Near Eastern influence in my jewelry and the components that I used and still use. But when I tried to join that with the pottery, it didn't work for me. I couldn't find that. That path to do it right. It just made no sense. I have put Chinese coins on possibly a piece of mine that had some a Chinese influence to it, and it just looked like an afterthought. I just could not make it work. So I don't anymore. No. And people have asked me, do you make clay beads? No. I have to. No. That I know me. I don't know. No. I don't need to do that. No.
So how would you say that both your choice of slips, your color palette or palette, and your approach to your forms, your shapes, how would you say that has changed over the years?
It's a struggle for me to not be as controlled with my colors and glazes, and I think through the years it's changed. In the beginning, it was one color on this piece, one color on that piece, and I think as I've progressed through ceramics, through my pottery, I hope I'm a little freer with my glazes now than I was. They're still the same colors, but the application of the color and trying new things, I think, has been, after 25, 30 years in one spot, you want to try. I want to try something else. So I think it's been the struggle of becoming a little freer, a little less controlled in my application of glazes, and my forms too, for that matter. I think I try not to be, and it is a struggle. I want it just exactly this way, and with pottery it can't be. It never is. It's always, they're one of a kind, and you never actually, at least I have never actually had the ability to make every one of them exactly alike, and I don't want to anyway. So
Clay's personality comes through. So let's talk a little bit more about your process. Can you take us through making one of your functional pieces, ceramic pieces?
We have 2 slab rollers, like a giant pasta making machine that I can take a lug of clay and feed clay through it, and I get a nice pristine, beautiful, sometimes not on the first pass through, but slab of clay. And at that point, I will have a form of some kind, depending on what I want to make. I will draw a pattern sometimes and make a prototype of a piece, lay it on the clay, cut out the various components, and then construct using a glue, which is clay and water mixed together. It's a slurry, and that's the glue that holds the various components together. I have mats that are made for clay to put texture on the slab maybe first. I have various things, whether it's a leaf of some kind, or I was in a play at one point, and it was set in the 60s, and I needed a pillbox hat, and I didn't have one. I was, the matron character, and I needed a pillbox hat. Well, when it came, it had a veil. Well, I didn't want a veil, so I cut the veil off. And I looked at it, and it looked like a honeycomb. Well, I've used that veil to texture my clay. I use shells. I use all kinds of things. That we have one, I can see it from here. It's a child's toy, a car, and the tire tread on that little car is wonderful to go back and forth on your clay. So if I want to texture something, I will texture it when the piece is flat, and then construct it from the textured pieces, which is what I do with the skull pieces. I texture the pieces first and then construct with those. I can either use a form that will slump the clay will slump into the form, or I have plaster pieces that I can put the clay over, and it makes a hump mold. It really depends on what I'm trying to make. I've used things as simple as a plastic ceiling tile to texture. Each piece is different. Each piece is different.
And how about your firing?
Well, we when the piece is leather hard, I can do a little bit to it. Then I let it dry further, and it is bone dry. And when it's bone dry, the moisture's out. We fire in an electric kiln and fire it to a bisque stage. It's not matured. It's not vitrified at that point. It will still accept water. It will soak up water. I our glazes, we have large tubs of glazes. We mix our own. That's when I wish I'd paid more attention to chemistry. We mix our own glazes, and when a piece is in the bisque stage and we dip it in the glaze, it absorbs the water out of the glaze and holds the other elements on it on the surface. So the bisque stage is we can handle it. It won't fall apart. We can glaze it. We can add decoration with a brush. We can do anything with the decoration at that point. You can't add more clay to it because it won't accept any more clay. But we fire that to around 1800 degrees is the bisque stage for us in an electric kiln. And we glaze our I work with stoneware, so we then glaze or decorate. And when we get enough pottery to fill the kiln, gathered up, created, we load up our kiln is a gas kiln, and we fire that up to, we glaze fire up to 2,384 degrees, which is cone 10 if you're a potter, in a reduction atmosphere in a gas kiln. And that the bisque stage, the kiln takes about 8 to 10 hours, depending, to reach the 1800 degrees, and then it takes about a day to cool down. And the gas kiln, much the same. It takes about 10 hours to reach that 2,000, close to 400 degrees. And then takes that same length of time to cool down. So people have asked me, how long does it take you to make this piece? My smart aleck answer is 30 years.
Yes.
But it can be a month. It can be 2 months, depending on the drying, the time it takes to dry it, the time it takes to decorate it, the up and down in temperature in the kiln. And some potters even fire the same piece 3 or 4 times. We don't, because we fire so high with the glaze firing that the clay is completely vitrified, waterproof, and the glaze is matured. Our glazes fit our clay, mature at the same temperature as that the clay matures.
Right. And so when you're filling the oven, it might be all your work, it might be a mixture of yours and Mal's, it'll be just whatever fills the oven each time.
Right. And we have boards of a certain size that we fill, and it takes about 18 to 20 of these boards to fill. It's a 30 cubic foot kiln, so it takes quite a bit of pottery to fill it. So it might take us a week to get enough pottery, or it might take us a month to get enough pottery. It depends on what's going on, how many students, how prolific the students are, how many shows we have
Right.
through the month. So sometimes we fire twice a month, sometimes more, sometimes less.
How many shows do you do?
I don't do shows January, February, and March. My shows start April and May. April, I'll do 4 or 5, and if you count the number of weekends in April, I'm busy every weekend. And it takes quite a bit to have enough pottery to do a show every weekend. So that's what January, February, and March are involved in, is getting enough pottery made to do those shows. June, the early part of June, I have shows. May, there's usually 2 or 3 shows. June, maybe 1. Then July and August in the heat, I don't do any shows. And they start again September, October, and November, and I do 1 show in December. So I've never really counted actually to see, and it varies every year. I mean,
Right.
I will, some years, oh, I haven't done that show, I'll try it. Well, I'm not going to do that one again. Or, ooh, that was a good one, I'll do that next year. So it varies every year.
What percentage are out of state shows?
Oh, not maybe 10%.
many.
No.
Okay. So, how do you sign your pieces?
I sign my pieces boldly with my last name. I use a slip, iron oxide, and sign Prigmore on the bottom of my pieces. I have pieces in my collection of pottery that potters have used a stamp of some kind. Well, that's very nice, but who made it? I don't know. I like the piece, but I don't know who made it.
The name's not there.
The name is not there.
Mark.
That's right, and I don't know who made it. I'd love to know, but I don't. My father asked me once to make him a coffee cup with his name on it. And I didn't do it right away. And he kept reminding me, you've got to make a piece of pottery with my name on it. And finally, I did. I made him a cup, and I gave him a cup. And he said, but it doesn't have my name on it, Donna. And I said, Daddy, every piece of pottery I make has your name on it, because Prigmore's my maiden name. Well, I still had to make him a cup with his name on it. But that didn't work. But every piece of pottery I make has my father's name on it.
What is your creative process, beginning with how you get new ideas?
Wow. I think I try to think of trends of functional pieces that, for a while I made, for a while olive trays where everyone wanted an olive tray, or everyone wanted something. But I pay attention, I think, to trends of let's face it, it's my living, so I want my pieces to sell. I want them to be aesthetically pleasing, but I want them to sell. So I try to think of things that I use at home. What do I need? What would I like? What I think will be fun to make or to look at or to have and use. And I think a lot of it has to do, because my background was with sales, and I think a lot of it has to do with, well, what do I think is going to sell? What's somebody going to buy? And then I try to make it aesthetically pleasing to me, and hope that it is to someone else as well.
So not just observation, but maybe also Pinterest and kind of doing some.
I think I look around my kitchen. I look when I shop in stores. I look at things. Since I'm a hand builder and I use molds and forms and things. I look at the shapes of things I see in stores. Could I use that as a form? How could I add something to that to make this or that? And yes, I think the internet has been incredible, both for jewelry, finding components, as well as seeing different techniques that people use. And the same kind of thing with pottery. There is an abundance of videos on how to make this or how to do that. And it's just like our studio here using the same glazes. Mel and I using the same glazes. You can look at something online and see something and then bring that idea back to your studio and make something completely different than what you saw,
Right.
what your original inspiration or light bulb goes off.
And how about your creative routine? Do you put in a set number of hours? Do you work in the morning or at night? Or
I'm not a morning person, and I don't like fighting traffic. So I'm a midday. I'm a middle of the day. Not too early. No 5 o'clock traffic. I want it to be. So I don't hit it really hard, but 7 days a week there'll be one or the other of us here 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
We're not held to an 8 to 5. I did that. I don't want to do it again. But I don't think Mel has ever done that. He's always had his own creative hours, and I'm not creative first thing in the morning, and so I'm a middle of the day person.
So, looking back on your career so far, what's been an important fork in the road for you?
I think and in my personal life and in my career, honestly, from my heart, it was when I was divorced. I decided then, for the first time, I realized that I could do something on my own. I was raised in the 50s and 60s. At that, and in my family, you could either be a teacher or a nurse. And I thought I wanted to be a teacher. But that didn't work for me because I married and then went to work and mostly in sales, office work, and then in sales. But then when I got a divorce and I was on my own as an adult, I was close to 37 years old, and I thought, I've got to do something. I can do whatever I want to do. What do I want to do? And I went into sales, and then by accident ended up in the paper industry. And if someone had ever told me that I would spend 20 whatever years selling something that nobody ever bought and still keep my job, because I sold paper to graphic designers and artists, but they didn't buy it. They told someone else what to buy and where to buy it. And I ended up in the arts, and it was that probably was the fork in the road that in my life and my career that made the most impact on me was being, as I call it, on my own. Since about 1983, I've been on my own, and it's been quite a ride.
How about one of the biggest highlight moments of your career so far?
Wow. I think it's all on a high. I really do. I can't think of any one. I mean, I can't think honestly of any one pinnacle of anything. It's just all been great. It's all been good. It's just all been good.
How about a low point?
Low points. Not any real low points as such. Maybe they must not have been too low if I can't really think of one. I was lucky enough for about 13, 14 years to be one of the Harweldon mystery players. Jim Watts wrote an entire new murder mystery play every year, and we, as he used to refer to as thinly sliced ham, actors, we got to put life to his words, and they were so wonderful. And then that ceased about 2 years ago. That might have been a low point for me, was not getting to do. I loved being one of the Harweldon mystery players.
And I did get to see one performance and very much enjoyed it. You did a great job. All right. Well, is there anything we haven't talked about before we look at your work?
No, I can't think of anything except the names of maybe my cats, Mandy and Lily. But other than that, I can't think of a thing that I haven't told you, that you haven't asked about, and maybe even some things you didn't ask about. I think that's about it.
Okay, well, we'll pause a minute and take a look at the work here.
So can you talk to me a little bit about the cup and saucer here?
Well, that's an example of my skull pieces, and I think the cup itself with skulls on it has been my bestseller, actually. It's all hand built. I don't work on the wheel anymore, and the tray itself was you can use it for, I don't know.
You can use it under the cup. I love the shape of it, but you can also use it separately for something else.
If you want a little tea and crumpets, or coffee and cookies, or a slice of pie or cake, it works pretty well, and they work together.
That's a neat idea. And how about this piece?
That is one of my boats series. I think I've made quite, 5, 6 of those. I'm not sure exactly the number of my boat series, but this one does have dragonflies. There's 2 separate glazes. I use those 2 glazes a lot together. It is functional as a planter. It can be, as I say, I use mine at home to put my mail in, but you can use it for a lot of different. I have another one on my television that I have some things that I want to save, but I don't necessarily want people to see, so I keep it in one of my boat forms.
That's neat. So this has some really interesting, I think, texture and treatment.
Well, that one is a very interesting piece for me. I just started making an oval box, and the more I worked on it and put the texture on it, and put joined the slab and made the oval, and I thought, well, that's not enough. That I don't like just it looked like an oval, kind of do nothing. And so I put a top on it, and then I thought, well, now I need to make a hole in it, and then I thought, well, maybe I should have handles, but if I have handles, how will that work? And it came out, and I thought, well, I'm going to make a purse out of this. And it reminded me of the purses from the early 60s. And in fact, I had one. It was acrylic, it was clear, and you could put different colored scarves and then put your lipstick or your brush or whatever inside that scarf, but that's where the color came from. So the design on it looked like some of the scarves that we used in the 60s, and it had the nice little handle for I think the ones that I had, the handle would articulate, it would move. This one doesn't, but that was my inspiration finally as I worked through the piece, was the little purses from the early 60s.
I like that. And this was the urn you were telling me about.
Yes. This was a piece that made for a dear friend. And the pieces that she collected of mine, the functional pieces, had a twisted, I call it a rope handle, on serving dishes, casseroles, that sort of thing. Those were the handles on either end. And I wanted to incorporate that. These are the colors that she collected, the copper green, and the spodumene, and then there's a third green that's sort of splashed on it that is a heavy copper green glaze. And this piece, I didn't want it to look like a funeral urn. I just wanted it to look like one of the pieces of pottery to have the elements of the pottery she collected. Mm-hmm. And I think it worked.
Oh, I do too. And it's sort of reminiscent of a bamboo motif a little bit, and that Asian. Maybe you can see what you want to see, I guess. Well, but that meditative
a lot of my work quality. For some, again, I go back to that ethnic thing, that my jewelry, I have a tendency to do more ethnic jewelry. A lot of my pottery, for some reason, has an Asian look to it. Mm-hmm. Some of my pieces have a personal. I have a personal attachment for some reason. The funeral urn was one. This one was a commission. This was a prototype for a commission for Eastside Christian Church here in Tulsa. The minister there was having a birthday, and his wife, Dina, said that Evan collected chalices and wanted me to make him a chalice for his birthday. I never made a chalice before, but I do a lot of these bowls with the spiral, and then have the interior is very smooth, and I wanted the lip on this to be smooth enough that you could drink out of it and not cut your lip. And I had never made a pedestal base, so this was a prototype, different things that I could do, and the finished product looks much like, almost exactly like this. And then Evan wanted a pitcher to go with it, and then a plate, and it turned into 3 or 4 more pieces.
Actually, prototypes, because they're more religious, and they're the
it was a pitcher for
official,
the wine,
right,
and a plate. Instead of the wafers at that time that Evan was using, torn apart pieces of bread, so he needed a big plate, and he's a very large, manly man, and so it had to be a large chalice for him, for his hands, and the pitcher was the same way. It had to be pretty hefty, but this was the prototype for his chalice.
Oh, that's neat. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Donna.
You're welcome.